Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 16 of Awakening the Ordinary. My name is Daniel Clower, and we need to talk. This week, of course, we will be talking about the Iranian conflict with Israel and the effects that we can expect in the near and long term. And of course, we'll also be talking about some election news. But I also really want to take a deep dive into the systems that we live in and how they affect our everyday lives in ways that you may not even recognize. At its core, this podcast is not just about being aware of the things that are going on around us. It's about really seeing beyond the surface level and understanding what's going on at a deeper level. So, to that end, get ready for some philosophical discussions about what this all means, and some introspection on a historical perspective, and how it may help us interpret what's to come. So, let's talk. And the first thing we're going to be talking about is actually a story that I think really relates to our last episode very well. If you recall, I went on a bit of a tirade about our modern day military and the effects that it has on the people that join, the people that don't join, and how it just generally speaking breeds an unfair system. One of the things that I briefly mentioned is how when you sign up for the military, you sign your life away. You are no longer a person, a human being. You are property of the US government. And that has been brought to light in a really startling and shocking way this week because of a certain airman who decided to speak out on his beliefs. Air Force active duty Christian Stevens posted a clip on TikTok stating that he didn't like the direction that the administration was taking when it came to immigration. Now, it was a very respectful video. He wasn't impugning the honor of the military or the country. He wasn't swearing or embarrassing himself in any way. He was simply stating that this wasn't what he signed up for. He doesn't believe that the government should be sending masked thugs to essentially kidnap people who are here both legally and illegally, and that when he signed up for the military, he signed up to fight for everyone in this country. People that may not be documented as well as people that are born here. And because of his bravery, and because of his eloquence, and because he spoke up for what he believed in, he was put on 5150 in a 72-hour involuntary psychiatric hold. Now, Christian Stevens did not do anything that deserved any kind of psychiatric hold, voluntary or involuntary. He wasn't threatening anybody. He wasn't saying he was going to be hurting himself or hurting other people. He simply spoke up for what he believed in. When I say that, when you join the U.S. military, you give up on some of your basic human rights, including the right to free speech, I mean it. So for any of you who may be watching this and considering a career in the military, I just wanted to bring it to light because it was just a startling and striking revelation on how, when you do sign up for the military, you lose your rights. You are not treated like a person. You are put in a psychiatric hold for 72 hours for speaking the truth, for sharing your opinion in a way that this administration does not agree with. So it's not going to be front page news anywhere. You're not going to hear about this on CNN or Fox News, but to me, it was an important story. And to me, I wanted to highlight people like Christian Stevens for speaking out, for speaking the truth, and standing up for what they believe in, even when the people above them will do anything they can to silence you. But speaking of the military and speaking of this insane administration, we really do need to talk about this Iranian conflict. So just before this episode was recorded, President Trump announced that we have successfully completed bombing runs on 3 sites in Iran, including Fordow. He also mentioned that if peace is not achieved very soon, more strikes are to come, and they will be even more and more devastating. Let's go ahead and recap basically how this whole thing got started and where we're going from here. Initially, this whole thing started because Israel said that Iran was on the cusp of developing nuclear weapon capabilities. Now, our own intelligence director swore in front of Congress back in March that that was not the case. Iran was not actively working on nuclear weapons. While they were stockpiling nuclear material, they weren't actually developing any kind of weapons or rocketry that could turn that nuclear material from being used for energy purposes to being used for weapons purposes. Reports, in fact, said that Iran was anywhere from 1 to 3 years away from being able to actually use a nuclear weapon in any way. Now, Tulsi Gabbard, our director of intelligence, is now coming out and saying that, oh, the mainstream media is taking everything out of context, but it's public record. She said, yes, they are definitely stockpiling nuclear material. No, they are definitely not working on any kind of nuclear weapons. And their supreme leader has not greenlit any kind of program for working on nuclear weapons. That is directly what came out of her mouth under oath back in March. It seems to me, and to basically anybody who's paying attention at all, that this war was never actually about nuclear weapons. That was a very handy scapegoat and a handy excuse because nobody in the world virtually wants Iran to have access to nuclear weapons because, frankly, we can't trust them. They're a horrible regime. They commit atrocities on a daily basis. Now, what it seems like this war is about is actually regime change. And it seems that way because Israel sent us a plan a few months ago on how to destroy Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, basically the president of Iran. And Trump said no. Trump said, no, do not do that right now. I am currently in negotiations with Iran to get rid of their nuclear program. Now, rewind a little bit and let's look at why we are in negotiations right now for Iran to get rid of their nuclear program. Because we actually had a deal with them a decade ago about getting rid of their nuclear program. It was the Iran nuclear deal. President Obama negotiated it. And basically, we ended up giving them a whole bunch of money to step down their nuclear production. They got rid of a bunch of their nuclear material. They got rid of a bunch of their hard water plants and things that they need to essentially make any kind of nuclear weapons at all. After Obama negotiated that deal, when Trump came into office, he pulled us out of that deal. He said that Iran was not holding up their end of the bargain. There is very little evidence to suggest that that's true. Now, do I think the deal was the greatest thing in the world? No, we gave Iran a bunch of money to do something that they should have done anyway, that the entire globe wanted them to do, which was step down from nuclear proliferation. We don't want people having nukes, and we definitely don't want people like Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei having nukes because we can't trust him at all. I will say that it did seem like the deal was working. There were complaints that, maybe the inspections that they were getting to show that they weren't advancing their nuclear program weren't as sufficient as they needed to be. There were theories that they were hiding things from inspectors and that they were secretly working on their programs. There's really very, very little evidence, if any, to suggest any of that is true. But regardless, Trump pulled us out of that plan. And Iran continued to denuclearize anyway for quite a while. Fast forward to today, and they have been back on their nuclear BS because they basically felt like that was their only bargaining chip. They have Israel right next door, who is a deeply unfriendly neighbor that they hate with a burning passion. And they have seen how the global hierarchy works. They saw that Ukraine got rid of their nuclear weapons and in exchange are now under invasion from Russia. So Iran decided they were just going to go ahead and start working on nuclear material again and develop a nuclear weapon. We entered into negotiations basically at the start of Trump's presidency. And a couple of months ago, we gave them a deadline of about 60 days to get a deal done. Now, that 60 days was not exactly a fair deadline because at the beginning of the deadline, when we first announced that we needed them to agree to some kind of a deal or there would be consequences, we really didn't even know exactly what we were asking. If you asked various different members of the Trump administration, you would get a different answer on what exactly we expected from Iran. Marco Rubio said that they were supposed to get rid of, like, all of their nuclear material, whereas other administrators said they were supposed to get rid of a certain amount so that they could still use nuclear power, but they couldn't actually develop nuclear weapons. And so it was just a confusing mess, basically. We really did not have any kind of defined goal for the negotiation other than nuclear Iran bad. So we got started on this negotiation, and the guy that Trump sent to do the negotiation is one Steve Witkoff. Now, you may be familiar with the name Steve Witkoff because he is a real estate mogul. He really only rose to prominence during this Trump administration because he's never really been deeply involved in politics before now. He hasn't. And so why we named him as our chief negotiating ambassador, I will never know. I have some theories. It rhymes with funny, and it starts with M, but I can't tell you exactly why we thought that Steve Witkoff, real estate mogul extraordinaire, was the guy to get this deal done. But whatever. Regardless, we gave them a time frame of 60 days. We didn't even really start negotiating for a period of time at the beginning because we had no idea what we wanted. We had a meeting scheduled for 63 days out to continue negotiations, but 60 days passed. Day 61 hit, and Israel took that as the green light to go ahead and start launching rockets at Iran. President Trump asked for peace. He demanded peace. He told Israel, don't do anything right now because I'm in the middle of peace negotiations, and if you start launching rockets at Iran, it's going to look like I was holding them up in negotiations to take them off guard when you attack. But Israel went ahead and attacked anyway. And they really got themselves into kind of a sticky situation because Israel knew from the get-go that while they could take out a lot of nuclear sites, there was one in particular that they simply do not have the capability of taking out, and that is the site at Fordo. If you have been paying attention to this whole kerfuffle at all, you will know that Fordo is a nuclear site that is basically built into the side of a mountain. Israel is incapable of hitting that nuclear site in any kind of a meaningful way. They don't have the ordnance for it. They have very large rockets, but not rockets large enough to level a mountain, which is what they would need to do to attack this site at Fordo. Regardless, Israel went ahead and started a war. They started firing rockets. Iran retaliated. Benjamin Netanyahu at first announced that by the end of the weekend, Iran's nuclear capabilities would be totally and completely gone. And then later he announced that actually it might take a couple of weeks, but just hold on tight. Trust us, they're totally gone. Don't worry about it. And then in the meantime, they were not only attacking nuclear sites, but they were attacking places like TV stations. Because like I said at the very beginning, this was never really about just nuclear weapons. This is about regime change. Israel wants the supreme leader of Iran dead. They want to go in and get rid of the Iranian government right now. And they don't really have a plan for what's going to come after. Benjamin Netanyahu right now is in a lot of hot water. I mean, he could be tried for war crimes for what's going on in Gaza. To me, and again, this is just my personal opinion, I kind of think that Benjamin Netanyahu went ahead and started this war because he knew it would help him win an election again. But the other thing is, I mentioned this was kind of a sticky situation. Because let's say Israel attacks Iran and is unable to affect regime change for whatever reason. Either they don't have the ordinance for it, and there are significant reports that Israel has been running out of munitions because of everything that's going on in Gaza, or they don't have the manpower for it. And there have been reports that reserve soldiers are simply not showing up when called upon in Israel. But for whatever reason, they are unable to effect regime change, and they have to continue on having destroyed many of Iran's nuclear sites. Well, then it gets dangerous. Because when you corner a dog, they lash out the hardest. So Iran would then know that Israel is willing to essentially try and chop the head off of the snake. And at that point, they would have every incentive to rush a nuclear program right in Fordo, where they know Israel cannot strike back at them, and create a nuclear weapon that they could then use to either threaten or outright attack Israel. So Israel kind of went all in on this. And they went all in on the idea that either they could effect regime change or they could convince their stupid patsy, Donald Trump, to get involved in this war on their behalf. So on June 21st, Donald Trump got involved in this war. He announced that, yes, we sent bombers and we went and leveled Fordo for them. We had to send our largest bombers because we sent our biggest bombs. And these bombs are the type of bombs that can level mountains. Now, Iran had already threatened that if we got involved in this war whatsoever, they were going to retaliate against us. And we have about 40,000 soldiers still stationed in the Middle East that are all put at risk because of Donald Trump's decision today. And I just find it so striking and so weak that Donald Trump was unable to prevent Benjamin Netanyahu from starting this war. I mean, we give immense amounts of foreign aid to Israel. In fact, even though we canceled foreign aid for every single other country in the world, the one country that we continued to pour money into was Israel. So forget about all of their horrible humanitarian war crimes that are going on in Gaza, and think about this. Israel has now shown the world who has the real power. They are the tail that wagged the dog. They were able to force the most powerful and the richest nation in the world into a war that nobody wanted. Trump campaigned on the fact that there would be no more wars, that he would have the most peaceful administration in history. And yet here we are, sending bombers to get us into a forever war yet again, and a regime change in the Middle East. Have you heard this story before? Because I have. We lived through it already. There has not been a successful regime change in my lifetime in the Middle East. There has not been an example that we can look to and say, yeah, that's how we should do things. That's how it worked out well in our favor. Because every single time we dip our finger into the Middle East and we get involved in these stupid, horrific, and poorly thought out wars to effect regime change, it backfires on us. The only regime change that maybe even might be successful in my lifetime right now is the one going on in Syria that really had essentially nothing to do with us after we pulled out. And who knows if that's even going to be successful. So no, instead, what we are more than likely doing is building new terror cells in Iran, building new generational hatred for America in Iran, and the consequences may not come next week. I already have seen comments where people are saying, oh, what war? This isn't a war. We haven't gotten into a war. We went and bombed a place. That's it. We're out already. Where, first of all, no, we're really not out already because Donald Trump has already said that we are likely going to be bombing them more and more. But second of all, you have to stop thinking in terms of a week or a month or even a year. In 1990, the U.S. imposed sanctions on Iraq. And these sanctions were financially devastating. In 1996, they started concocting this plan for how to use planes to effect a terror attack in America. In 1998, they started actively plotting the 9/11 attacks. And in 2001, 11 years later, we had the worst terror attack on American soil that I pray to God we will ever have. And then, of course, later Osama bin Laden wrote a letter spelling out that one of the major things that caused them to do this attack was the sanctions that we put in place in 1990. So you need to stop pretending like if we don't get bombed by Iran next week that we got off scot-free. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard in my life. It is the most short-sighted, dumb perspective I have ever seen on international relations. Okay, this is not a 1-week event. This is not a 1-month event. This is more than likely not a 1-year event. This is a decade later. The blood of our children may be watering the ground because Donald Trump decided to bomb Iran in a war that we have absolutely nothing to do with. Israel got us involved in this for no reason, and now Americans are going to pay the costs. Trump is an old man, and he will more than likely never have to see the consequences for what he is doing today. But this is yet another example of old, rich men sending young, poor men to die. If Iran, God forbid, ever does form more terror cells and enact more attacks on Americans, either domestically or abroad, then of course we are going to be forced to retaliate. And it's just feeding into this cycle of violence and pain and murder and killing and hell on earth because Benjamin Netanyahu couldn't keep it in his pants for Iran, and Donald Trump decided he wanted to get in on the fun too. And that's not even covering the possible financial consequences, the disastrous economic impact this could have. Because Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and Oman. If they wanted to, they could bring it to a complete halt, just like the Houthis did in the Red Sea. It wouldn't be that hard. Just the threat that Iran might start bombing ships going through the strait would be enough to bring traffic to a halt. And that is where all of our Saudi friends send their oil through. That's where the United Arab Emirates ship through. That's where Saudi Arabia ships through. That's where Iraq ships through. That's where they send their oil through to get to the ocean. They have to go through that one single strait. So if Iran really decided to just proverbially go nuclear and burn everything to the ground, they absolutely could. So they are now economically holding a gun to our heads because Donald Trump decided to get us involved in a war that we had no part in, that never needed to happen, that we were involved actively in negotiations to prevent when Israel decided to pull the trigger. Before the bombing actually occurred, there was a huge rift opening up in the Republican Party. There are these, new wave GOP members like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene and those types who are isolationists, and they're anti-war. They don't want to get involved in stuff going on overseas. They don't like other countries. America first. That's their whole shtick. That's what Trump was supposed to be. And then you've got the traditional neocons, like the old school Republicans, like Marco Rubio, who are all about this. They want to go in and perform regime change and bomb the crap out of Iran because, I don't know, they just didn't learn the lesson from the forever war that we just got out of. So there was this huge rift opening up, and I'm kind of eager to see what exactly is going to happen now. Is this new wave of the GOP going to completely abandon their ideals and morals and start supporting this because dear leader says so? Or are they going to stick to their convictions? Because while I may disagree with a lot of the new wave GOP on a lot of things, I can genuinely say I would have a lot more respect for them if they stuck to their convictions. If they didn't simply bend the knee to whatever whim Donald Trump has regarding foreign wars and Israel and whatever else. In fact, there was actually a really funny interview that Tucker Carlson held with Ted Cruz, where he was basically grilling Ted Cruz on Iran and talking about how Ted Cruz really had no idea what the heck he was even asking, what the heck he was talking about when it came to Iran or regime change or anything like that. It's pretty funny. Take a look.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people living around?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah.
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is that relevant?
Because if you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and predominantly Shia. Okay, this is cute.
It's not even... You don't know anything about Iran. So
okay, I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who
don't know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. And the reason is twofold. Number one, as a Christian, growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my... You pull out the phone and use the Google.
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it and you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two...
Well, hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to supper Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
So is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's referring
of Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
So as you can see, he really kind of just pointed out that Ted Cruz just has no idea what's going on. He can't see 5 inches past his face. He's just looking at the immediate future of, oh yeah, let's go bomb Iran. That'd be awesome. And he can't even fathom the consequences down the road a week later, a month later, forget about a decade later. The dude doesn't even know anything about the country at all. So it's not often that I will be on the side of guys like Tucker Carlson. I really think in a lot of ways he went off the deep end. And I can pretty safely assume that the reason he's so against this war right now is because he's incredibly deep into Russia's pocket, and Russia and Iran are buddy-buddy, and so he was probably given marching orders to try and prevent us from getting into this war, but still, for whatever reason, today I'm on Tucker Carlson's side. Either way, at the end of the day, if you feel lied to by Donald Trump and his promise of no more wars, you should. He lied. And it's not a surprise to me because he lies all the time. But a lot of you are taking this personally, and you should. And if you want to show Trump that you are not okay with this, you have to show up in the midterms. And I'm not even saying you have to go vote for a Democrat if that's just completely against your beliefs, but do a little bit of research. If you are against wars, if you are anti-war, and if you feel betrayed by Trump getting us into this war, look at what your local congressman and local senator have said. If they are against this war too, fine. And if they hold that tune and keep saying the same things, even as we get into this, regardless of what Donald Trump wants, great. Vote for him. Keep him in office. But if they are marching in line behind this guy who lied to your face about no more wars, vote them out. Vote for a Democrat. Vote for an independent. Just get these guys, these losers, these sycophants who cannot help but attach themselves to Donald Trump's butt no matter what he's doing, out of office. Please, these midterms are coming up in 2026, and I am going to be pounding the table week after week telling you, do your research. Figure out who it is that is up for election. Find out what they're doing. Look at their record. Find their clips if they have any town halls, if they give any news briefings, if they talk publicly at all about anything. Find out what they believe. Go look at their voting record and genuinely take a look to see if it aligns with your beliefs. Are you against this big, beautiful bill that's going to be robbing millions of their health care to pay for tax cuts for the ultra wealthy? Did your local congressman or senator vote to pass this bill? Vote them out. I'm not asking you to vote for a Democrat. I'm not asking you to vote for anybody at all. I'm just asking you to please, for the love of God and country, be informed and vote. Go vote. This has been your weekly PSA for the 2026 midterms. Actually, on that note, I have a couple of stories that I want to talk about with you here. First off, with everything that's going on right now, it seems like the perfect time for Democrats to strike, right? The DNC just held re-elections for their vice chair position. Okay, big whoop. Why does this matter at all? Well, notice I said re-elections because they already had elections for their whole political organization. The DNC elected their chair, their vice chairs, everybody. It all went through fine, except they're claiming that there is some kind of procedural error, some kind of parliamentary rule that was broken that they are saying made it so that women had a much harder time winning the election. Now, I have done a lot of research and I have tried to figure out exactly what rule it is that they supposedly broke. And I have basically come up empty-handed. I see the initial complaint and it says that essentially women have been robbed of their votes somehow, and that the rules of the DNC dictate that they're supposed to try and get an equal distribution of males versus females when it comes to their chair positions. And both of the vice chairs that were elected were men. And that's about all I've come up with. So, first of all, if you guys have any more details on exactly what happened, please let me know. You can drop it in the comments. You can shoot me an email, whatever. I would really love to see it to just get a more full picture on exactly what happened. Because right now, again, all I'm seeing is that they're saying they somehow robbed women of their vote. I don't know. But second of all, the vice chair that got the boot in all of this is David Hogg. Now, David Hogg may be a name that is familiar to some of you. He was a survivor of the Sandy Hook shootings, and ever since then has been an outspoken proponent of gun reform and, things of that nature. And he's been a political activist. And frankly, I have not always agreed with everything that David Hogg stood for. I haven't. I actually found him in many ways to be kind of annoying, but he had a really interesting plan that I think the DNC should have taken note of. His plan was essentially that what they were going to do was set aside some money, anywhere from like $15 to $19 million, and they were going to use those funds to actually primary their own members. So they were going to find states that were extremely blue, so very, very left-leaning, very Democrat-heavy, essentially seats that they knew they weren't going to lose. There was no danger that a Republican was going to just sneak in and, take the spot if there was infighting or whatever. And they were going to look for specifically districts that had old members who had been elected for decades and decades, or who had members who were, 75, 80 plus years old or whatever. And they were going to try and present a primary challenger who was younger. This younger person was essentially going to just put up a fight and see, do the voters want to keep going with the person that they have been voting for decades and decades, or do they want a fresh new face of the party? That's that. If they want the new person, they can elect the new person. If they want to keep the old person, they can keep the old person. No problem at all. But the Democratic Party has a huge issue with seniority. For example, as a party, they don't have any term limits on committee chairs. Republicans have rules. They say you can't be a committee chair for any longer than 6 years. That's it. If you've been a committee chair for 6 years, you're out. Somebody else gets to come in. Democrats don't have that. So that's why you have Democrats who are like 80 years old, who have been the chairs of committees for their entire life, and who are sitting here with these old-fashioned ideas, low energy. They can't even really pay attention in meetings anymore. They don't really know what's going on. I mean, there are notable examples in the very recent past of old Democrats that are not entirely there in their head, that are still showing up to work and showing up for the votes, and they might not even know what they're voting for exactly. I thought this was a pretty interesting plan. I thought it was a good idea. I thought it was a good way to revitalize the Democratic Party that has so much wrong with it right now. And is getting younger people in to replace old people going to fix the problem? No. There are deep, deep issues with the party at its core, at its platform, that need to be addressed before the Democrats are going to be able to be popular again. But was this at least a solution? Was this a step in the right direction? I thought so. But obviously the establishment did not like that idea. No, the establishment had a huge problem with it, actually. And so they have taken the opportunity to let David Hogg know that he's not really welcome. In fact, there were actually calls for him to step down before this whole re-election thing got started. Now, once this re-election thing was officially put into place, David Hogg actually did step down. He released some recordings talking about how essentially the DNC chair, Ken Martin, was pretty much making his job impossible and robbing him of all respect and making it so that he would never be able to get anything done that he wanted to get done. And so he quit. He said, you guys clearly don't want this. I'm not going to be able to do the things I want to do. So adios, good luck, no hard feelings. Now, Ken Martin is a name you may recognize if you are a longtime viewer, because I mentioned him back when the DNC elections first happened as the guy who said that they were only going to be taking money from the good billionaires. So you may already have an idea on what I think about him. But I'm not the only one, because a couple of other top union leaders are leaving the DNC as well because of disagreements with the leadership. So instead, what the DNC is doing is they are taking $20 million, which, funnily enough, is slightly more than what David Hogg wanted to take. And they are running this Speaking with American Men project. It's over the course of 2 years, and it's basically to find out, why don't young men like Democrats? And their initial results are showing that young men find Democrats to be weak, and also they think that Democrats don't care about them at all. Which, no duh. So I could have saved you $20 million there. So in this moment where maybe for the first time in my lifetime, we actually desperately need the Democrats to come together and wrest control of the reins away from the madman orange guy in office, they are consumed with infighting and trying to figure out why the popular boys in high school don't like them. God save us all. And genuinely, I really do kind of feel bad for David Hogg here, because he was brave enough to step up and give a bold and impactful plan for a way that Democrats could really change, a way that they could move forward instead of staying mired in controversy and, horrible approval polls and, just trying to figure out the most politically appropriate way to say things all the time. And instead, he got completely shut down. And it really does look like Democrats have not learned their lesson at all. And I am genuinely terrified about what that means. Because while I think that everything that's going on right now is reason enough to vote for literally anybody that is not a Republican, a lot of people are not going to feel that way, and they are never going to vote for Democrats until Democrats take a real hard look at themselves, do some serious introspection, and change the way their party works, change their platform, make it appealing to broader bases. Stop focusing on these identity politics. And okay, I'm not saying that Democrats are the only ones who focus on identity politics, but they're real forward about it. Republicans kind of try and hide it in the background and sneak it in with dog whistles. Democrats just say it. And unfortunately, I think that's going to continue to lead to their downfall, and therefore the downfall of the United States of America. So please, from the bottom of my heart, I am begging you, get it together. We need you right now. We need you to stop being idiots, please. Okay. Second of all, when it comes to election stuff, I wanted to talk a little bit more about this New York election lawsuit that's going on. I very, very briefly mentioned it. I just said that a lawsuit was moving forward and it was something to look into. I looked into it, and it's actually a little more crazy than I thought. In Rockland County, New York City, there is a lawsuit that is now moving forward to the discovery phase, where they are taking a look at the 2024 election and some very strange discrepancies that have been going on. First of all, shortly before the election, there were changes made to the ES&S voting system. And again, incredibly astute viewers may remember that I mentioned this voting system when I talked about the strange results in Iowa and how the counties that used the ES&S voting system were the ones that had really odd discrepancies. The owners of these systems have said that while there were a lot of changes, they were all extremely minor changes and really had nothing to do with any of the results or anything like that. But the lawsuit states that these changes were actually pretty major, and they involved like software updates, they involved like the ability to access the internet or the ability to access and load more software into these machines, things that could be used for nefarious purposes. But the other thing that I find even more interesting is that there were some extreme irregularities when it comes to the actual voting tallies, some extraordinarily unlikely statistical outcomes. And when I say extraordinarily unlikely outcomes, and when statisticians say extraordinarily unlikely, they mean impossible. I mean, it's not possible. For example, more voters have written sworn affidavits that they voted for the independent Senate candidate than actually tallied votes for the independent Senate candidate. And additionally, there were some cities in Rockland County that the Democrats won down ballot. So, for mayor or for Congress or for Senate or whatever, all of the down ballot races, and that includes things like, any very local politician as well, all won Democrat. But Kamala Harris was tallied with exactly 0 votes in those counties. And that's just not possible. I mean, I think Kamala Harris was a pretty bad candidate, but I also think that she got some votes in probably every single city in the United States. Even the deepest red city, there will be people who vote for a Democrat. And vice versa. I mean, if there were any counties or cities where Donald Trump got exactly 0 votes, especially if Republicans won down ballot, That would be extraordinarily odd. So people wrote in sworn affidavits saying that they voted for Kamala Harris, and those votes evidently did not get tallied. Even if some craziness is discovered, even if it turns out that, yes, this was completely doctored, it was hacked, it was a stolen election or whatever, the election is not going to get overturned. The election was ratified by Congress, it was accepted, it's official, that's that. Sorry, no takesies backsies. So in a way, that makes me feel like Republicans should be completely okay with this. They should actually be all aboard with this. If they think nothing happened at all, well, there's really no risk, and it would just make Democrats look silly, right? If they do the investigation and it turns out there was nothing funny happening at all and it was all completely above board, then, hey, you get to turn around the whole 2020 stolen election thing back on Democrats and say, no, they're the crazy ones. Look at them, those conspiracy theory nuts. And if it is right that it turns out that, oh man, this election actually was stolen, well, whatever, you don't really have to suffer any consequences. The election was already ratified. So it's kind of a win-win for Republicans. I mean, yeah, people would be upset if the election was stolen, and maybe Trump himself would be impeached or something like that. But in general, Republicans would still control the presidency, the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court. You know, it wouldn't have any meaningful change necessarily for the Republican Party as a whole. So I really think they should get behind this. I think everybody in the country should get behind this because we deserve to know what happened. And statistical findings like that are incredibly, incredibly unlikely to the point of impossibility. And that being said, Trump has now written an executive order with very suspicious timing directing us to look into the 2020 election. Again, to try and determine if there was any trickery going on and if the election was stolen. Even though this has gone through the courts over 60 times, even though time and time again, even with independent auditors, it was found that there was nothing wrong whatsoever, and it was the most free and safe and fair election in modern history, yada, yada, yada. We're looking into it again. And I'm not trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth here, okay? I mean, I think if we really are looking into the 2020 election in a genuine way, I think they won't find anything because I don't think anything was stolen. I think no rational person at this point thinks that anything was stolen. It has been investigated time and time and time and time again. Like I said, over 60 lawsuits, like 3 independent investigations, like Congress got involved. I mean, it's been proven. It was a fair election. I'm concerned this time around, though, because the Trump administration has already shown that they are willing to lean on people until they give them the answer that they want to hear. It's just like when it comes to Tulsi Gabbard and the intelligence community and whether or not Trende Aragua was coming from the Venezuelan president or totally unaffiliated. And they kept leaning on people until they got them to, write a new report, which still hasn't happened yet, by the way, thank goodness. Or just like with that case with the New York City mayor, where they kept leaning on prosecutors to drop the charges over and over and over again, and they kept resigning until finally they found somebody, foolish or cowardly enough to do what they wanted to. I'm kind of worried that they're going to do this investigation and they're just going to lean on whoever's in charge of it over and over and over again until they finally are willing to just lie and say that, yeah, something happened. And at that point, I mean, you get one shot to tell the truth, right? You get one shot. And after that, it doesn't matter. Like, okay, I wasn't actually even planning on talking about it this episode, but I really think I need to bring it up. There was this horrific event that happened in Minnesota this past week. It was an absolute nut job, went on a rampage and murdered a couple of state legislators and injured another one and his wife. It was a really horrific event. I mean, genuinely. The details are all over by now. It made national headlines, but basically a dude dressed up as a cop showed up at a couple of houses and committed a horrific act. For some reason, even though the people that were killed were Democrats, Republicans went on this rampage talking about how this is a crazy leftist and a Marxist and a Democrat, and this is the party of violence. Look at how violent these Democrats are and how awful they are, and they just love hurting people and blah, 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 blah. And obviously the truth came out, and no freaking duh. The guy's not a Democrat. I mean, I don't even think his political affiliation really matters that much, but Republicans tried to make a story about it, so here it is. The dude was a Republican. The dude was a MAGA guy. He was a super Trumper. That's why he went and tried to kill some Democrats. Duh. I mean, again, this is not freaking rocket science. You don't have to be a super genius to understand that the guy killing Democrats is probably not a Democrat. Like, seriously, I'm not trying to get heated about it, but it was so moronic and it was so just morally bankrupt to go out and start flinging these crazy accusations, and none of it even made any sense from the beginning. There were these crazy conspiracy theories about how Tim Walz appointed the guy, and so the guy was actually working for Tim Walz, and then when it turns out that Tim Walz was on the dude's hit list, crickets, absolute crickets. So the problem is that when you lead off with a lie, that's going to be the thing that many, many, many people hear. And then later, if you do decide to tell the truth, which, by the way, a bunch of these Republicans never even apologized or came out and said the truth or came out and retracted their statement or anything, which, again, is just completely heinous and morally bankrupt, and genuinely screw those guys. Like, that's horrific. The public deserves better. You need to be fired regardless. Even if you come out later and you give a mea culpa and you say, sorry, I was wrong. Not everybody that you told the lie to originally is going to hear that. Some people are only ever going to hear the big lie that you told in the beginning, and that's that. And that's what they're going to hold on to in their heart and in their mind forever. That is going to be the truth to them. The truth to millions and millions of people now, because of people like Mike Lee, who went out and were claiming that it was some crazy Marxist, is going to be that Democrats are a party of violence. And it doesn't matter that the truth is the dude was a MAGA guy. They're not even going to hear that. They're never going to acknowledge that or hear it. They're only going to know what Mike Lee decided to say. So when it comes to things like the 2020 election and claiming that it was robbed, claiming that it was whatever, it doesn't even matter that when they do these investigations, they are going to find out if it is a legitimate investigation. They're going to find out that it was a free and fair election. It just matters that their Lord and Savior, Donald Trump, is saying that it wasn't. That's what they're going to hear. They're never going to hear the second half. They're never going to hear the truth about it. So that's why I just implore you guys, be so careful with your accusations and your words, because you never know if you're not going to have a chance to retract it and make it right. Please. Like, it just bothers me. I mean, people come out and they say these crazy things. You can look at it. If you're watching this video after I put it up, go look at the most recent short that I put up where I talked about how Donald Trump said Governor Newsom's crime was running for governor, and that's why he should be arrested. Those words came out of Donald Trump's mouth, that Governor Newsom's crime was running for governor. And that's what I said in the short. And the comment that I got on there was somebody calling me a liar and an idiot and saying, this is what Democrats do. They just lie. They come up with things. So I posted a link. I posted the proof. I showed him the video clip. Crickets. Absolutely nothing. Because these people are not interested in the truth. They are interested in whatever fits their narrative. So it doesn't matter that I'm not even a Democrat or that I wasn't lying at all. That guy is holding on to his truth in his heart because he believes that Donald Trump would never say that. And so that's just what he's taken to the grave with him. And it doesn't matter that I can come out and I can show him the truth and I can do whatever. So in my short, I probably should have put a clip of Governor Newsom being accused of running for governor, right? I probably should have put where Donald Trump said that, but too late for that. So just, I guess I'm imploring all of you, just be careful. Be careful what you say. Make sure you say it with conviction. Make sure you say it with proof. Do a little research. That guy was so sure that I was lying, and if he had just looked for 5 seconds on Google, he could have easily seen that I was telling the truth. So before you go out and make some drastic claim, Google it. Just Google it. Take 30 seconds. Make sure that whatever thing you're claiming is actually true. It's important. It matters. We live in an age of misinformation right now. It is so easy to fall for clickbait or fall for a headline or something like that. Do a little research. There is more information out there than ever before. There are no excuses for being uneducated, for being ignorant. There's just not. You have a supercomputer in the palm of your hand 24/7. Go look for the truth. Please, don't even take my word for it. If I'm telling you something and you think it sounds a little wild, please, go look. Go Google it. Go fact check. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to anybody that you have a conversation with to be equipped with the facts and the truth. You owe it to yourself. So please just do your research no matter what. Before you go making claims, do a 30-second Google, ask ChatGPT. I'm not saying take its word for it all the time. AI can hallucinate, but just do something. Okay. So with that rant over, I guess this final kind of topic that I wanted to cover is something that has just been, it's just been so heavy on my mind lately. Ever since I read an excerpt from The Grapes of Wrath where he talked about how people had to starve and die because it interfered with the profits of corporations to allow people to get the free food that was rotting on the vine. The free oranges were piled up and burned with kerosene. The potatoes were thrown in the river and guards stationed at the sides to make sure nobody would fish them out. Really, especially since then, it's just been so heavy on my heart that I need to talk about the system that we live in our day and age, capitalism. And I just want to preface this by saying, in my professional life, in my personal life, many times I have had people tell me, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. And just to be frank, I always thought that was bullcrap because usually it was a boss telling me that. And usually they were telling me that because they didn't want to be bothered figuring out a solution or fixing any problems. They just wanted to ignore things and they wanted me to do all the work. So they told me, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution because they didn't want to think of anything. Well, I'm coming to you guys with a problem and I don't have a solution. I don't. I have some ideas on things that could maybe make it better, but I truly believe that unfettered capitalism in the way that the United States experiences it is a deeply rooted and corruptible part of the human condition. The human condition that we live in forces us to always strive for greater. And unfortunately, a lot of people strive for greater and greater and greater, even when they never need to, even at the expense of others, because we live in a state of unfettered capitalism. I just want to preface this by saying that I don't think that capitalism in and of itself is necessarily a great evil or scourge upon humanity, right? I mean, I am using the prefix unfettered because that's the problem. It's when capitalism has no constraints. It's when we live in a society that turns everyone into a number instead of a human. Right now, every second of the day, you are assaulted by capitalism. You are not a human being anymore to these corporations. You are a number. There is data being gathered on you every moment that you are connected to the internet in any way. They are measuring and tracking what websites you look at and for how long, what you click on, what interests you, what your hobbies are. They have an entire profile built about you based on the things that you do online. It's pretty startling, to be honest. A lot of companies and organizations have been forced to kind of release the data that they have on people based on some European laws on privacy that got passed a year or so back, where you can now request your full profile, essentially. And so if you're on Discord or Google or any of these websites, any of these applications, you can submit a request and ask them to show you their profile of you. And with pretty startling accuracy, it will be able to tell you a lot about yourself. It'll be able to narrow down your age range, narrow down your gender, your ethnicity, how many members of your household you have, if you have any kids, because that's all you are to them. You are your statistics. You are your numbers. They want to know what they can sell you. And if they can't sell you anything, they want to be able to sell you to other organizations. They want to be able to sell your data constantly to the highest bidder for whatever purposes they have, whether it be things like targeted advertising or things like price gouging. You are not a human anymore to them. You are a number. And the number that matters most is how much money you have in your pocket. Every second of the day, you are used to enrich somebody who is richer than you. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, they are collecting your data to find out how they can make money off of you. That's their entire goal. And that is, frankly, what they are legally bound to do. Because in our system of shareholders, they have a fiduciary responsibility to make profits for their shareholders. And what that means, a fiduciary responsibility, is they are legally obligated to try and make the best financial decisions they can. So, for example, United Healthcare right now, we all know what happened to their CEO and why. Well, after that happened, they started approving more claims because, no duh, that's a pretty big wake-up call, right? Well, now they're being sued. They are being sued by their shareholders for approving more claims and saving more lives because it comes at the cost of the shareholder. The shareholders are saying you are not fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility to us because you are instead trying to save more lives. That is unfettered capitalism. That is what we live under right now, where as a corporation, you can be punished for trying to do the right thing if it comes at the cost of a single dollar to your shareholder. Throughout our lives, we are told that all you have to do to have a good retirement is invest, invest, invest. Well, look, let's take a look at how the banking system works. You put your money in the bank, right? The bank doesn't just hold on to your money. They give your money to other people in the form of loans. But they have so much money at any given time because that's where people put their money to keep it safe that they can get away with it. If everybody at the same time tried to withdraw their money, they would not have enough to cover it. They just would not. They would have essentially an invisible and insurmountable amount of debt, and they would go under. It's called a bank run. It's happened before in eras like the Great Depression. If you've seen It's a Wonderful Life, that's what's happening at the beginning of the movie. There's a bank run, and the bank does not have enough money to keep up with all of the people trying to withdraw their money at the same time. So banks are built on this invisible trust that you have in the system, basically. You trust the system to survive. You trust that if anything happens, you're still going to be able to get your money. usually because it's FDIC insured. And in exchange, they get to hold your money and play a shell game with it and lend it out to people at exorbitant rates. And they get to make profit off of that for essentially nothing, just for being the middleman. They hold your money, they give it out to other people, they make money off of that, and they give you a very teeny tiny portion of that. You get a little bit of interest on your savings accounts. So instead of doing that, they say, okay, don't just put your money in a bank account. You should have 6 months of living expenses put away in a bank account. Of course, that's what they say. But don't leave all of your money sitting in a bank account. No, you need to invest it. You need to put it into the stock market. And so that's where we get our shareholder society, where all these corporations are built on the backs of people essentially using their 401k, using the stock market as a bank account. And it's the same sort of deal, except this time you're not actually guaranteed to get your money back. You're not FDIC insured if the bank goes under. You are putting your money into these companies and demanding that they do everything they possibly can to make more money. And in exchange, the money that you give them will be worth more later. You buy 10 stocks in a company, all of a sudden the company doubles in size, it's worth double the amount. Well, you got 20 shares worth of money for 10 shares worth of dollars. And that's how our whole society is built. It's built on people investing money into these corporations and then demanding that the corporations squeeze every single dollar out of you and me. That's just how our system works. These corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, meaning you, if you have a 401k, to absolutely screw over every single person in the country to make sure that you make a dollar. That's just how it works. That's how our whole retirement system works. And speaking of working, every second that you are working for somebody else, you are working to make somebody richer than you even more rich. That's just how it works. If you're working in a company, they will try and pay you the absolute least amount that they can possibly get away with. And they'll do it to the point where if you ask for a raise, they won't give it to you, but they're more than willing to hire a new person at a higher rate, even though they know less than you. And they do that to build a culture. They want to ensure that you and every other person working there cannot just ask for raises willy-nilly. No, because that would be dangerous. If you thought that you actually got to share in the profits of the company, you'd be demanding a lot more than you're making right now. So no, they pay you the least amount that you can possibly make so that they can enrich themselves more and more and more. So these CEOs and executives, they don't know what you do for work. They couldn't do your job if they had a gun to their head. But they're making 10 times more than you, 20 times, 30 times, 50 times as much as you. And I guarantee you they would not trade positions with you. If the CEO of McDonald's was told he could make the same amount he makes now, he just has to work 40 hours flipping burgers and work in the drive-thru instead, he wouldn't take it. He'd rather be the CEO. So we live in this weird, perverse reality where the harder work is paid less, the easier work is paid more, and obviously there are exceptions, okay? I'm not saying top to bottom, but generally speaking, the lowliest jobs are the hardest, and they're also paid the least. And you're forced to work so hard to the bone to make such a little amount of money so that you can make sure that the people above you who are already richer than you get even richer. Minimum wage was originally designed to be able to support an entire family of 4, a husband, a wife, 2 kids, a dog, a house that you buy, a picket fence on one person working. That was the original intent. That's why they designed minimum wage, because that was the American dream. That's what you were supposed to be able to get with minimum wage. And nowadays, my generation, we are frankly lucky to have a house at all. I am blessed beyond belief that I was able to get a house and not have to rent one for the rest of my life. And in the meantime, you have people arguing and fighting tooth and nail to not raise minimum wage a single dollar. I mean, they put up such a fit about the attempt to raise the national minimum wage to $15 an hour. You can't live on $15 an hour. And if you wanted to match the original idea of minimum wage, which was being able to afford a house and 2 kids and a dog and a white picket fence and all that, you'd have to make minimum wage like $48 an hour. Because again, I mean, you can look at the statistics, you can look at the maps, it'll show you how much on average you need to purchase a home in any given state. And in most states, it's going to be 6 figures. You have to be making like $100,000 a year. And to get $100,000 a year, you got to be making like $48 an hour. And they are never going to raise minimum wage to be $48 an hour. They're just not. So they would much rather just say, well, sorry, get a roommate. Well, sorry, don't have kids. Well, sorry, you just don't get to live the American dream. You just don't. Because if you got to live the American dream, I couldn't afford my 3rd yacht and my 5th vacation home. And that just won't do. We live in the richest and most blessed and most powerful country on earth, right? I mean, that's what they say. So why is the American dream dead? The fact that we have a single person homeless in this country, the fact that we have a single person going hungry in this country, it is a tragedy, an unimaginable, unforgivable tragedy of the system that we live in. And by the way, it is illegal to be too poor to afford a house. You can't be homeless. That is not legal. You're not allowed to be homeless. You're not allowed to sleep on the street. So it's not like you can just decide, I don't want to participate in the system and I'll put up with the consequences. No, you can't. You have to participate in this system. You have to. They make you. From the second you are born, they make you. The credit score system is one of the biggest, greatest scams that has ever been perpetuated on the American people. Within the credit score system, you have to, first of all, put yourself into debt. If you do not have any kind of debt, you will have bad or no credit. That is a fact. You have to have either some kind of a credit card, some kind of a car loan, some kind of a house loan. You have to show that you are willing to put up with making payments on your debt to have a good credit score. If you want to participate in the credit system, you have to have a good credit score to start off with. So how are people supposed to develop a good credit score? Well, first of all, when you don't have any credit at all, you have to sign up for a credit card and hope that they approve you. And they will only approve you if you have enough money already to begin with. And then when they do approve you, they will sign you up for a credit card at an exorbitant and outrageous interest rate. And okay, yes, you are supposed to just pay your credit card off every month and not ever suffer from the interest rate. Yes, that's good. That's great. But God forbid something happens and you have to rely on that credit that they gave you, then you're stuck. Then you get into that vicious cycle where you're paying off these essentially predatory loans that they are giving you in the form of a credit card. And you have to get more and more credit, by the way. Oh, and by the way, the age of your credit matters. So if you have a credit card and you've only had it for 5 years, that's not good enough. You need to have been in debt for 10, 15, 20 years to be able to start showing that you have a good age of credit. But by the way, if you have been in debt for 20 years with a credit card, and then you sign up for a new credit card, well, that cuts your age of credit in half, baby, because now you have one line of credit that's only a year old. Not good enough. The system that they have designed for credit scores is just, it is so cruel and just poorly thought out. I mean, genuinely, like you have to not only prove that you can pay rent, for example, if you want to get a mortgage for a house, it doesn't matter if the rent that you're paying is actually more than the mortgage payment. That's not good enough. No, you have to show that you can juggle. You can juggle 8 forms of debt all at once, and you can do it for years at a time. And then they'll approve you for a mortgage. But only if you have enough money sitting in your account too. Oh, and only if you can make a down payment of what, like 10% on a house. It is truly like heartbreaking. It makes me want to cry thinking about the future of our children. How are they ever going to afford a home? How are they ever going to know the promise of the American dream under this system, this crushing system, this cruel system? Something has got to change because this is not right. We live in the richest country in the world, and the largest reason for bankruptcies in America is healthcare. Healthcare. That's something that every single other developed country in this world has figured out a way to provide for their people. And you're trying to say America is the greatest country in the world, but these other countries have figured it out and we haven't? Are we stupid? Are they just better than us? Or is it the fact that greed and unfettered capitalism has wriggled its way into the heart of our country because we allow things like lobbying and we allow things like super PACs where corporations can invest millions of dollars into candidates to make sure that they will do exactly what they want, where big pharma and big medicine and big healthcare can all collude together to make sure that we never pass any kind of universal healthcare, because that would just cut out their bottom line. You are not a human being to these corporations. You are a number, and they don't care if you die because of it. They don't care if you go bankrupt. They don't care if you lose your home. The only thing you are designed to do in their eyes is work, work, work until you die. And if you can have kids along the way to make sure that you keep replenishing their working population, all the better. You have to pay for water. You have to pay for utilities. You have to pay for the most basic necessities just to live. The Constitution was written with the idea of these inalienable rights. And what that meant to the founders was not that the Constitution was written to give people these rights. That's not what inalienable meant. That's not what a God-given birthright is. A God-given inalienable birthright is something that you are born with inherently unto yourself. The right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And in a country where you have to pay your bottom dollar to not die in a hospital, where you have to pay your bottom dollar to have water to drink, that is not a country that recognizes your inalienable, God-given birthright to life and to liberty and to pursue happiness. In this country, you have one birthright, and that is to work to make somebody richer than you even richer. And that is to work and work and work until you die. And if you are smart, and if you played into their system, and if you invested the way that they wanted, and you poured your money into their corporations, maybe you can retire when you're 65 or 70 and spend the last dozen years of your life not under the oppressive thumb of some corporation. So tonight I presented you with a problem and no solution. Do you have any concept of a thought or a plan or an idea on comprehensive economic reform for this country? Please let me know, because I don't know the solution, but I know it's not working right now. I don't know if it's universal basic income. I don't know if it's, Social Security for all or whatever. I don't know. But it ain't this. So let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you below. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in and giving me your time. I am so deeply honored. When I get comments, when I hear people are watching this, it humbles me to see how many people I'm reaching with my little microphone here in my corner of the world. So as always, again, thank you deeply and truly for joining me. And don't forget, when you change your perspective, the reality changes. I'll see you soon.